weren't Anglican were also affected by the penal laws, and it very much affected Presbyterians as well. They couldn't stand for public office. They certainly couldn't be part of the old Irish Parliament. Almost to a man, that Parliament were all Anglicans as well. They were actually paying a tithe, a tax to the established church, to the Church of Ireland as well. So this was starting to affect the Presbyterians, certainly in this area. And they were radicals. They wanted to change. They were very much affected by, firstly, the American War of Independence. A lot of the kinfolk of these people fought alongside George Washington. And of course, the French Revolution as well mesmerised the Presbyterians of Belfast and of this area as well. And they thought, you know, this could be us. We could do something similar along the lines of the French as well. So these things were starting to come to a head. The United Irishman Society was set up in Belfast in 1791, and some of the men from this area were involved in that as well. The organisation, society, had to go underground after 1793 when England declared war on France. It was known there were sympathies with the French, so the Crown authorities very much were looking, trying to find who these United Irishmen were. So the organisation went underground, and that very much affected how they were operating as well. So we're here today because James Hope is actually buried here, and he was very much one of these radical Presbyterians. So I'm going to pass you now over to Stephen and learn a little bit more about the man himself. Stephen.
Right, anybody at the back, come on up here. Do you see this grave here? Come on ahead. This is the grave of Jimmy Hope, one of Ireland's most famous patriots. His mother and father came from the Highlands of Scotland, and by their own admission, that was in the 1750s, and they basically said they had to leave because of religious persecution. At that time, you have the big Jacobite Wars and also a major battle, Culloden. So his parents left at that time, and Jimmy Hope then was born in I think it was 1764-ish, you know. So as Donald was saying, this area here, right up to Larne and over to Ballymena, was a hotbed of radical, well, everybody calls it radical, but I call it kind of normal, Ulster Scots Presbyterian tradition. You have a big rising in 1760 with Hearts of Oak. 1770 you have another major rising no one ever talks about, the Hearts of Steel, where people from this area actually flooded into Belfast, and that was called the Battle of Belfast on Christmas Eve 1770. A battle no one ever talks about, very few have ever heard of. That was the rich Ulster Scots Presbyterians took a stand against the cess tax and the tithes that were all paid to the Church of Ireland to pay their ministers and to pay their landlords. So as the Ulster Scots had to build their walls for them, build their roads for them, so they had enough, and they rose in the 70s. This man here, 1778, you have the formation of the Volunteers over in America. You have the American Revolution was happening, so they needed something over in Ireland. All the troops were then moving over to America to fight, so they need this defence force over here. So this was the third time that the volunteers were called in the 1700s. It spread across Ireland really, really fast. It was a kind of military organisation where they were allowed to drill and do different things. Have big processions in the towns in Belfast. They used to kind of mimicking what the Orange Order do today, but a lot different from the Orange Order. Have big parades all over the place. But Jimmy Hope, he was one of the lieutenants in the Rough Fort, a volunteer force, and it was him who carried the flag on Bastille Day in 1791 and 1792, which was celebrated in Belfast here. It wasn't until 1793 that Bastille Day was then banned, when there was a big battle called the Battle of Valmy in France in 1793 November, when the head of the King Louis was chopped off, and then everybody then declared war on France, and so everything French was then subdued everywhere. So at that time the volunteers were then all disbanded, but because us Temple Patrick folk were a wee bit radicaler than the rest, and we remember 1770, only 20 years beforehand, they didn't hand in their weapons, and they were commissioned to hand them in, and people were sent up here to gather weapons. Nope, these boys weren't handing nothing. These were going to protect it just in case something happened again. So Jimmy Hope, he was one of their leaders. He was when the Society of United Irishmen was formed. He was a latecomer to the society, only joining I think it was 74, 75, but he quickly built up a friendship with Henry Joy McCracken and the other leaders, and through that friendship they seen this man Jimmy Hope as a great orator, and someone who befriends everybody, a friend to everyone. And he was actually sent down to Dublin, into the mills of Dublin in 75 to organise the United Irish Societies in the mills, in the linen factories of Dublin. So a year later he comes back up here, and he has made the aide-de-camp to Robert Sims. Robert Sims is a mill owner in Ballyclare, one of the richest men in Antrim here, and he funds United Irishmen. So Robert Sims is made the commander-in-chief of the Army of Ulster here. At that time in 1797, there's 110,000 men signed up as United Irishmen in Ulster, and that was 1/3 of the total Irishmen, United Irishmen in the whole of Ireland. 1/3 was up here, just in this province alone. So it was on this day. Sorry, I'll just take you back to the 1st of June 1798. There's a big meeting up in Temple Patrick there. Robert Sims resigns his commission. Wexford is burning. The rising is happening down south. We're being embarrassed. Ulster Scots folk are being embarrassed, and they don't like this. Any Ulsterman doesn't like being embarrassed, right? So you've got down south is burning. Robert Sims up here resigns his commission. He says he wants to wait for France. Other folk, heads of the United Irishmen in County Down, they resign their commission as well. They're left leaderless. Jimmy Hope is left, has aide-de-camp to no one, and the meeting disbands. So 2 days later, on the 3rd of June, another meeting is held up in Parkgate. It's disrupted. I'm sorry, that was the first one. It's disrupted and then goes to Temple Patrick, right? So the second one is outside Larne, between Larne and Ballyclare. It's on the 3rd of June 1798. That is the first meeting. Nothing happens, but it's the Ulster Scots folk of Ballyeast and Ballynure, Ballyclare, who actually see that nothing's happened and push them all into another meeting. And that's when Henry Joy McCracken is elected as Commander-in-Chief of the United Irish Society, of the Army of Ulster it was called at that time. So Jimmy Hope, he retains the commission, has aide-de-camp as second in command. So we're going to hear about him throughout the day, and why he's so famous and held in such great esteem to everybody, to radicalism within Ireland and abroad. As I say, great friends with all the leaders. He names his first child Robert Emmett Hope. He names his second one Henry Joy McCracken Hope. So great friend to the leadership of the United Irishmen, and really takes it to heart. As I say, a soldier in the cause. After the rebellion, he's one of the people who actually lives, and he lives as a mill worker. He only was born a couple of hundred yards up the road there, you know. So does anybody know why the dog's on the gravestone here? No. Right. So this was supposedly the family pet, and when he was on the run after the Battle of Antrim, up in Slemish and up in Little Colin, his family would have a pouch here and put in bread and meat and all other stuff in the wee pouch, and this Irish settler was sent to find him. And isn't it? But this is another one of his sons, Luke Hope, who was a printer, and he kept alive Jimmy Hope's socialism through a paper called the Newslight, I think it was called. Flashlight.
Rushlight.
Yeah,
Was he
sorry.
his brother? Was he his
Sorry.
son?
I think that was actually the grandson. Either grandson or son. Just can't remember this time. Maybe it was his son.
Son now, he's born in 1794.
94, yeah.
Maybe his son.
Right, dead on. That was his son then. Dead on. Over here, we have the bigger graves. Now, you've probably heard of Francis Joseph Bigger, the great antiquarian. So, that's his big one there. The one with what looks like the dollar sign on the big one. That was actually blown up in the, was it the 80s? It was blown up and it was redone, blown up during the Troubles, you know. But he was fascinated by the United Irishmen. It was his granddad, David McCracken, David, I'm getting ahead of myself. David Bigger, he owned a big mill in here in Mollusk, and back in the 1700s it wasn't called Mollusk, it was called Biggerstown, because they owned all this area here and the mills were all called, it was David Bigger's mills. So David actually went and fought at the Battle of Antrim, and in nearly every episode or every edition of his paper, what was it called, the Ulster Journal of Archaeology, he has a wee bit of information to the United Irishmen. And it's brilliant if you ever get to look at it. It ran from I think it was 1850 to 1910, something like that there. So that's really it from now. We will hear a lot more about this man Jimmy Hope as we go throughout the day. But this is where he was buried here. He died in Belfast in, I think it was 47. So, but just any more, Donald?
Just
A man called Reverend William Steele Dixon. Right, so William Steele Dixon was the commander of the forces in County Down, but above him, the commander-in-chief was Henry John McCracken. So
Jimmy
Jimmy
up
Hope,
the road there. There's just a car coming there.
Jimmy Hope was pushed from house to house to house, trying to find Reverend Dixon. However, he couldn't find him, and unbeknownst to him, Reverend Steele Dixon had been arrested 2 days previous and was languishing in Blair's camp. He was then taken to a place called the Black Hole in the middle of Belfast, which is a damp wee old prison cell. But Jimmy Hope couldn't find him. He was about to be captured because the place was swarming with local militia and military, because everybody knew the rising was going to be on the 7th, but they didn't know where it was going to happen. So from the 5th, or so from the 3rd, the whole of the province knew that the date was going to be the 7th, but they didn't know where. Jimmy Hope wasn't able to find William Steele Dixon, and that's why County Down didn't rise on the 7th with Antrim. So all the messages were sent to all the local United Irishmen all across the country to rise. The one sent to Ranelagstown was this, it was very brief, it was: Army of Ulster, tomorrow we march for Antrim. Drive the garrison of Ranelagstown before ye hasten to Farmer Junction with the Commander-in-Chief, Henry John McCracken. The one sent to Island McGee, we have that one there. It says to take Ballycarry and head for Larne. The one sent to Limavady Valley to Dungiven was to take Drumquin, head for Limavady Valley. They were all different. Okay, so on the 7th morning, you had Henry John McCracken and his 2 brothers came up here. They were probably staying in Island McGee, or sorry, staying in Greencastle at the time, somewhere around that area. So they came up here and they met Jimmy Hope, and they were probably anxious. Probably didn't know if their orders had got out the day before. A lot of the orders had been given straight over to the local yeoman, and that commander of the United Irishmen then became a yeoman on the 6th that day. That happened in Kells, it happened in Kilrea, all over the place. But when he got up here, Jimmy Hope was waiting for him with his Spartan band, his 80 musketeers. And eventually people started to drip and come into here. So at about 10 a.m, they had about 300 people gathered here waiting for, I suppose they didn't know what was going on, didn't know what was happening, until a man named James McHenry comes riding up the road here with a message, and the message was that Larne had fallen, the rebels were marching now for Donegal Hill. He had a message saying that Ballyclare had risen, Ballymuir was taken, and they also said that Ballycastle or Carrickfergus had fallen, which was obviously wrong, but they didn't know that. here. So that really emboldened McCracken, and he stood up here. He went up to this hill here. Anne was telling me that it didn't always look like this. Only in the last 20 years it got very overgrown. This is Craigierowan Mott. It could date back to the time of Dalriada or the Normans. How long?
What's the French?
So Henry Joy comes up here. He's got 300 or so men on the bottom here, and he says a big speech, and he goes, "If we succeed today, there will be sufficient praise lavished on us. If we fail, we may expect proportionate blame. But whether we succeed or fail, let us try to deserve success." And from here, one of the witness testimony at the trials then says that his eyes beamed with fire that animated his soul, a heart that was strong and knew no fear. So at this point, at this stage here, he says to one of his men, a man called George Crabbe. Now, for the last couple of years, I've always told the wee story about George Crabbe and said he was the first martyr of 1798. But he wasn't. It was Lauren. Lauren rose at 2 a.m. on the morning of the 7th of June. And if you go into Lauren today, you wouldn't expect a place like that to rise. That was the most rebellious place. These boys didn't want to wait, the Lauren folk. If you go today, you'll see all the flags, the British flags, and no sea border and all the rest, and you'd think you were going into Windsor or somewhere like that there. But the first place was the good Ulster Scots folk of the north. They rose in rebellion. But George Crabbe was given the message to take to Lisburn. Now Henry Joy, they didn't know if his battle plans had went to County Down, so he gave a message to George Crabbe. It was to the Lisburn United Irishmen to we're going for it, today's the day, rise. However, entering Lisburn, George Crabbe was met by 3 yeomen, and he was about to get off with when they seen a green cockade sticking out of his hat. Now, 2 years previous, wearing the green was banned. He was taken. I think he ate the message that he was to take the county down, but because he did that there, he was hanged.
No.
Yeah, it's a shame. Now, there's no GA clubs named after George Crabbe, or no any kind of clubs today, or any football pitches or field, and I think it's a bit of a shame. I always call him the first martyr here of the Battle of Antrim, because he was here, Craigierowan, good Ulster Scotsman from the Glens, and was the first one to die as a result of Henry Joy McCracken in the Battle of Antrim here. So 10 o'clock comes, about 10 past 10. They're about to march for Antrim, and Jimmy Hope lines up his men, 80 of them in a line, four aside, with their musketeers. Behind that is about 300 or 400 men from this area here. They start marching and they strike up a song, the Marseillaise. The French, at that time, was the French kind of national anthem. But Jimmy Hope says that he didn't like this old song, so he quickly shut them all up, and he says he struck up a nice Irish tune. So then from here they marched into Temple Patrick. Behind us here is a Liberty tree. These were planted all around Ireland after 1798 in recognition of what happened. It then in the 1900s became the hanging tree. So it's yeah, they did, yeah. So there's, it's mad to think this is Liberty Tree and people died on that. But you're probably wondering why they met here. This was a wee village called Craigierowan, or Rufford, or as Anne was saying, Rufford. But the Ulster Scots folk are very good at saying as little as possible, so they put the words together all the time. So Rufford becomes Rufford. So this was a wee village. They had a book club there, and you had a blacksmith. So the blacksmith was busy all night making these scythes and pitchforks and any instrument you could find. We also have a man called Samuel Campbell, a brilliant poet who he used to write for the Northern Star, and he went to visit Robert Burns, and Robert Burns, he wrote for the Northern Star as well, until his last year of his life, where he actually joined the yeomen in Scotland. But he was a very radical. Some of his poems were very radical, and he was very famous for calling the boys who made the Union in 1707, the joining of England to Scotland. He called them the parcel of rogues. We're saying he brought forward to those who were putting down the United Irish Society as parcel of rogues. I always put out on Twitter that when the Orange Order's all on Burns night, always celebrate Burns evening and all the rest, and I said, oh brilliant, the parcel of rogues. So they came to all these places here because they were very well known. This was a very well known site throughout the time of Dalriada, right into the Normans. It's hard to know if it was a Dalriada site or a Norman motte. Also, 2 fields away you have an old ancient Irish site called Cairn Grania, or Cairn Granny, Granny's grave. It's a big cairn and with a big stone circles around it. I think it's double stone circle around it. So it was an ancient site that the Ulster folk took to the heart, and they wouldn't, sites like this here, they wouldn't touch. So that's the story of this part here. Have you anything more to add there, Donald?
No, I think I've covered everything. I'll just sort of quote one. There were different codes for greetings that United Irishmen used when they went underground after 1794. One example is, if you met another United Irishman, you might ask, "Are you straight?" "I am." "How straight?" "As a rush." "What have you got in your hand?" "A green bough." "Where did it first grow?" "In America." "Where did it bud?" "In France." "And where are you going to plant it?" "In the crown of Great Britain." So that was a secret sort of code, or that they would have used. But it's fantastic just being out in the weather like this. This would have been the same weather as I experienced in 1798 as well. So it's just fascinating to be here, the same time of the year with the same sort of weather.
Oh, definitely. It was one of the warmest summers they ever had.
Yeah, at the time.
I should really stick to my script for a wee bit more.
Go ahead.
Right, so Pope himself pens a couple of lines about the Marseillaise. So this is a wee line from Jimmy Hope himself. When they struck up the Marseillaise, he says, "But thinking we needed a more lively air, I struck up a verse of a merry Irish tune, a song, which was soon joined in by our party." So on the day after 1798, the yeomen, the Tipperary militia, Dublin militia was up here as well, went a bit nuts. They burnt all this area to the ground. So the forge was burned to the ground, and the main target was the book club, because they didn't want the Enlightenment values to come into Ireland at all. So that's really it.
Just to talk about what else was happening in Ireland at the time. The date chosen for rebellion in Ireland was the 23rd of May of 1798, and the signal to rise was the stopping of the mail coaches from Dublin. I think the only one they stopped was the one coming up north to Ulster, but the signal went out anyway eventually. But the plans were overshadowed by the arrest of one of its major leaders. That was Lord Edward Fitzgerald in Dublin on the 19th of May of 1798, and he would later die from wounds some weeks later. So when the 23rd of May came, Dublin wasn't taken. Counties Wicklow, Kildare, Meath and Carlow did rise, but all eyes were on the north at that stage, Ulster, and that's of course, that was the hotbed really of radicalism, and that's where the United Irishman Society was founded in 1791. And it was in 1791 as well, they held a celebration here in Belfast for the second anniversary of the storming of the Bastille. So at that stage, all eyes were in Ulster. And it didn't take, it was until, of course, the morning of the 7th of June of 1798 when things started to happen here in Ulster. So we'll continue on then, Stephen.
This here's the wee heritage trail board that Antrim Borough Council put up, and behind you here is one that heritage trees that they put up in association with the Orange Order. The Orange Order put up this in it's the anniversary in 1898 it was founded. I went to right in the wee book. I went to all the Orange Orders around here, and there's no animosity. These were people around here were United Irishmen, and they were proud of their United Irishman heritage. Some people say this was put up as a two fingers to United Irishmen. I didn't get that when I was interviewing them. I thought they were very proud of what happened, proud of their own history. But some people will say to you that this was put up in spite of their past. But I didn't get that. Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions? Chilean family who lived just behind, he grew up just behind today's, what you call it, the big shopping centre and shopping complex? Junction 1, Antrim town. So they lived in there, a very prosperous family. He then went to and married at Dunedin, Church of Ireland. At that time, because of the penal laws, they had to go to get the marriage solemnised. So he went to there to get married. He lived up at Farnshane, just above Antrim, and he owned, what was it, a bleach works, you know, where you put the fabric out on the fields and it bleaches it white, you know. So while he was doing that, his wains were only young, you know. He would also write for the Northern Star, write these poems. And the poems were about, they were, as you would expect, they were anti-establishment. So the British basically they came up here, they seen that they had to make a martyr of someone to try and kick these Ulster Scots folk into hand, you know. So they picked out R, and they sort of set him up to be executed. So there was two Tay festivals were going to Belfast, from Belfast to Derry, where they were stationed, and they stood out. They stayed in Antrim for a night. They got hammered in Antrim town, and they were taken to be signed in as United Irishmen. So they were taken up to Farnshane, and they were signed in. They were administered the oath by another fella. I can't mind. I think his name was McClellan from Macara or Macafil, something like that there. But William R was picked up for it. He was arrested and he was taken to Carrickfergus jail. The year previous, in 1797, I believe it was, 1796, administering any oath of allegiance other than to the king was a capital crime, punishment by death. No one had been sentenced to death for this crime, and it was understood that William wouldn't be sentenced for this. But the big mock trial, the two Tay festivals came, and the first festival, his evidence was so rubbish that they basically couldn't use it at all, even though it was a big setup. So it was thrown out. A man named Hugh Wheatley, the other festival, came in, and his evidence stuck. At the trial, there was all this drinking at the trial, and it was basically just a mockery of the court system. And when the sentence was handed down, it was a court martial, when the sentence was handed down as death, the judge actually cried. He said, "This is a mockery, but all we can do, we have to sentence here to death." So he languished at Carrickfergus jail for weeks and weeks, and he was sentenced to go to the gallows one time, and it was a carriage came up from Belfast saying, "No, not today." Came up a second time, "No, not today." So he thought he was going to be let off. No one had been tried in a public court martial and been killed as being a United Irishman. Although the year previous, a lot of men were killed for being United Irishmen. There was wee mini risings. There was actually a rising at Fermanagh and Tyrone in the spring of 1798, but there was no big court martials. They were just put down proper. But he was actually, when he was languished in jail, he was given the key. He was offered a key to the jail, and he said, "No, I'm getting out in a couple of days. Don't worry about it." And this happened a couple of times. "Look, here's the key. Go on, save yourself." But he said no, he wouldn't do it. So The third time came where the scaffold was built and he thought he was going to be relieved again, but no carriage came up from Belfast. So he penned his big final proclamation to the people, and if you go online you can see it and read it out. But it was very moving, and he was sent to the gallows, and the Reverend William Staveley from Antrim town, he had grown up with him. He was the Covenanting minister at Knockbreda and then went to Kells and Collybackie. He went to the gallows with him, and another minister who grew up in Ronaldstown, a man called Adam Hill. He was a minister of Ballymuir. So he was hanged at the gallows where today's KFC is. If you go into Carrickfergus, that's where he was hanged, where the KFC is. So at that time, because he was hanged for being a United Irishman, it was illegal for him to be waked, and he was to be buried straight away. However, the good Ulster Scots folk of this area had said no way, because he was a Presbyterian from a well-to-do Presbyterian family, a well-respected Presbyterian family. His brother was the sheriff of Cranfield, of Ronaldstown area. His other brother owned the whole pile of land at Cravery. The Scots folk decided, no, we're going to pay our respects to this man. So the Reverend Adam Hill took him to Ballymuir Presbyterian Church, laid him out, and they waked him at Presbyterian Church. The local Masonic order formed a guard that night and protected the church, all around the church. But unbeknownst to the Masonic order, everybody else came down from the hills. Thousands upon thousands of men came down for this wake, right? So it was deemed illegal, and a message was sent up to the yeoman camp, which was just above Ballymuir. It's still there today. So they were to come down and get rid of this wake once for all. But there's good yeomanry, there's bad yeomanry, a lot of bad yeomanry. The yeomanry up at Ballymuir closed their gates, says no, we're not going. We can't. You know, they were Presbyterians as well. Say, no, we know this family. There's not a hope we're going anywhere near that. So they didn't come out. But on the next day, as they were travelling with the coffin to here, thousands upon thousands of people lined this route. Blair's camp, a dispatchment of yeomen and militia were sent up here to put it down. Once they got up here, they seen, we can't come here. Look, there's thousands of people here. So they had it, they couldn't do anything. What they did do was line all around here, and they shouted insults. That's all they could do, shouted insults at the coffin as being buried, put in here. As thousands of good Ulster Scots folk would come down here, they were shouting abuse. So you had a Tipperary militia, you had the Dublin militia, all lined all around shouting abuse at William Orr's whole family. So after William Orr was killed, the rising happened in 1798. His wife, the yeoman went up to his wife's house and burnt it to the ground. She had to hide with all his wee ones in a ditch for 3 days after. Unbeknownst to William, his wife was also pregnant, but William didn't know at the time with his 4th or 5th child. So that's one that he never knew of. So from here, that's the story of William Orr. His name then becomes synonymous with the rising, and the battle cry is Remember Orr, because you've got 110,000 people up here, United Irishmen. You got 200,000 down south. You got the third of the army of the United Irish Army was up here. So the cry was Remember Orr. Right. So we get back to the Battle of Antrim here. Once the column from Mollusk come into Templepatrick, they're met from the column from Carnmoney, and it was led by a man named Joseph Blackburn. In here, Templepatrick, the column in Templepatrick was ready and waiting, and it was led by a man named John Rusk. John Rusk, when he seen everything happen, he said they had put something in the oven. Has to go and check he has the oven off, you know. So he flits off and never comes back. He takes cold feet, as you know, it's to be expected with some people. They take cold feet and run. But I told you a wee bit about the volunteers previously. There's a brigade of volunteers called the Belfast Blues. It was headed by a man who owned the Dunadry Mill, a man who was Lieutenant Blow. Lieutenant Blow, after the the volunteers were all dispatched, whatever. There were no more. He hid the cannons in his warehouses in Belfast. So before the battle, a couple of weeks before the battle, he took the 2 cannons up to Blow's Mills at Dunadry. The week before, a couple of days before, he took them to Dr. Adair's hotel in the middle of Timilpatrick here. And the day previous, they took the cannons apart and put them under the rafters of the Presbyterian church, which will go past on their way to the next place. So on the morning, they're trying to get these cannons up. They're only managed to get 1 cannon up proper, and they have to steal one of his lordship's wagons. They put it on the wagon, and the local blacksmith ties it onto the wagon. So you've got this cannon now on a wagon, and the other one have to leave behind because it's such in bad disrepair, and it would just take too long for it to be made good. So they start off from here to Antrim. Donegal Hill's just over here. They send the message to Donegal Hill, right? It's time, lads, time to start. So you have all these boys up there from Ballinure, who had woke William Orr, and all the ones from Ballyclare all start making their way down from Donegal Hill in a column. So that's really it from now. We'll now go to Donegal Hill, and any more, Don?
Well, just sort of in general terms, the commander of the Crown Forces in Belfast was General Nugent, and he had information, basically. One of the reasons why the rebellion failed, one of the main reasons, was because of spies and informers. And there was a man, a local man actually, called Nicholas McGahan. Well, he was from outside Saintfield, and he was thought to be one of the major informants. So basically the plans that McCracken had made, very quick plans that he had made to bring columns of men down into the town of Antrim to take over the town, and he knew that a magistrates meeting was being held in the old courthouse there. These plans were known to the Crown Forces, so they were able to reasonably quickly back then, without the lines of communication we have today, start organising reinforcements to come down into the town. And all over Ireland, of course, that was the case as well. Also, just regards the actual forces that were used, Crown Forces, there were regular troops. There were 22nd Light Dragoons. There was a 64th Regiment of Foot with regards to the Battle of Antrim. The militia forces had been organised in Ireland just to some years before the Battle of Antrim, and they were arranged on a county basis. Most of the militia were actually Catholic as well. So with regards to the Battle of Antrim, the Kerry militia were involved, the Dublin militia, the Tipperary militia, Armagh militia, and of course the Monaghan militia. And they of course had run amok in Belfast, I think the year before, and had wrecked basically the premises of the Northern Star newspaper, which was of course the radical United Irishman newspaper. And they had actually arms as well, a cannon, 2 6-pound cannon and 2 5-inch howitzers. So they had been mobilised basically from the Blair's camp in Lisburn, and you'll hear more about that when we get down, when Stephen takes us down into the town of Antrim. They were the first reinforcements really to arrive, coming from the Blair's camp via Crumlin and coming over what is today the Belfast International Airport. The main runway would have been the old road from Crumlin to Antrim. So I think that's us maybe for now.
Yeah. So you have to think yourself now, who have we? We've got about 120 musketeers are on the roads, on a road starting to make their way to Antrim. They've got the cannon at the front. Jimmy Hope was asked later if he was the one who led the Spartan band from here, and he says no, it wasn't. He always likes to play down his role, but his role becomes very, very important. But it was a man named John Orr, one of William Orr's uncles. He then takes control of and reorganises everybody into their columns. So there's about 2,000 United Irishmen with pikes and spears and Lochaber axes and pitchforks start off from here to Antrim town, and the signal is then given to start to march. So let's go. Big motte up the top here, which we're going to split up into two groups, and one group is going to go up here. But Donald's just going up to see Miss Campbell and just let her know that we're going to go up the back way. Just to be rude not to, say that we're going up, But it's only for the fittest, and it is very, very steep, and it's very, very dangerous. So, you have to take very care. Those who don't go up there, I've got plenty of information for you about a court martial that was held just in the church here. Now, just look at this building. Just look at this building here. Beautiful Georgian building, was built in 1720, but it was built as a school for the church, St. John's Church over here. Right? 1798, this was taken over by the United Irishmen, and this was used as their prison. So all the magistrates that they taught all around the country, all the landowners. You had the George McCleverty from Larne. He was building in here. He came from Larne with a man called Alexander Dara. He was a butcher in the middle of town, in the middle of Larne High Street, and them two struck up quite a friendship, a United Irishman and a magistrate. And because of that friendship, George McCleverty then went to Carrickfergus after the rebellion, and he stood up for those United Irishmen who were being condemned or being tried, and he saved hundreds of lives doing that there. Although people who lodged in there also had no ill feeling towards United Irishmen and spoke up for them at the court-martial trials. Up here, of course, was people from Larne, from Ballygally, from Almagee, from Ballyclare, from Ballynure. Now, up here throughout the day was the ministers were holding church services. You had the Reverend Adam Hill, formerly from Rallistown, who waked William Orr. He was up here preaching throughout the day. He was the minister of Ballynure Presbyterian. You also had a minister called Reverend Foot Marshall. He was a Presbyterian minister from Ballyclare. Up here all day preaching. So there's probably about 6,000 to 8,000 men came up here that morning in 1798 to march on Antrim. Now, once they got the order from here that the men from Tim Patrick had started on the way, they then started in columns and headed down the mountain here, headed down the hill to join McCracken and Jimmy Hope and the Spartan band. So that's it from here. Now we will be splitting up into two wee groups, and one group will they would lay out the body until the body had decomposed enough so the grave robbers and the surgeons wouldn't be able to use it for medical purposes. So come down, we'll have a look inside and then.
Stephen, the one at Mollusk was very popular because they were closer to the boat to get the corpses over to. Yes, quite fascinating, the whole.
Yeah, morbid but fascinating.
I didn't know you could get in here. Did you get permission to get in?
No, it's always open.
My goodness.
So there'll be two men would sit in here with their guns just in case
Right.
someone would try and steal the body.
How many bodies would you have had?
I assume it would be one body would be lying
It's
there.
big, isn't it?
Kells has a wee one. Kells
Right.
Church Barn.
I suppose it would depend how many people had died.
It's a lot smaller, isn't it? This one a bigger one. This one was actually built. This one replaced a previous one. This one was built 1820, but before that there was also.
Right.
But we'll go outside.
What do you call them? Called a dead house?
What do you call these houses?
Well, I don't know, but nearly all old churchyards, a lot of them have them. And,
A wake
you
house. You call it a wake house. So we'll go outside and then I'll tell you a story about it.
Never been in actually before.
No, you wouldn't want to either.
It'd be full of
I would have made
ghosts.
the birthday party more exciting.
Yeah.
But no light pollution in here at night time. Pitch black.
Right. So doing these wee tours, we always talk about the good and the bad of the United Irishmen. Has to be bad goes for the good. It always does, you know. So we talked a wee bit about William Orr and how he was the first martyr. Well, he was sort of betrayed, and they kind of knew who betrayed him, the United Irishmen of the Farnsheen Road. So they decided to set a trap for what they thought was his person who betrayed him, a man called Finlay. Now, they decided to have their next meeting up here, in here, but the previous one, not this one here.
Right.
It's built up a bit more. So they said that the meeting was going to be at 7 o'clock, but they all arrived. The United Irishmen who were doing it, they were coming up here to meet. They arrived early, but they told Finlay it was at 7 o'clock. So they were all here when Finlay was coming up the road, so they could hear if Finlay was bringing with him yeomanry to arrest them all. So he was going to do the same, betray them all as well. So when Finlay got here, they got word that there was yeomanry coming up the road to arrest them all. So they did a mock trial. So they did this wee quick mock trial, and he was sentenced to be shot in the head. But because the yeomanry were coming that speed up the road here, they couldn't shoot him. But what did they do? They said it slit his throat. Yeah, wee bit gruesome. And then they ran across the fields to get away. So that's how they dealt with the man who betrayed William Orr to the
So
Crown
we left him
forces.
lying here.
Left him dead, yeah. So these houses, they sprung up in the 1700s, basically because of the Napoleonic Wars were going on, and they needed all these surgeons trained up. So you got Burke and Hare over in Glasgow and Edinburgh. I think it was Burke was from Castle Dawson, and they were coming over here, grabbing bodies, taking them over to Edinburgh for dissection.
Yeah.
Absolute nuts. But in the height of the Napoleonic Wars in 1807, a surgeon's hospital, training hospital, was set up opposite Cumneenham Jail in Dublin. So then now you have hundreds of these students in opposite Cumneenham, and they need bodies to practice on. So what do? They have these caretakers in the new hospital. They go out and scour the countryside looking for bodies. So they have to then build these here, lay the bodies out, and guard. We'll put 2 guards in the bodies and wait for it all to decompose, so we can't use the body. So there is a lot of accounts of down in Dublin, these caretakers actually going to Wexford in Dublin, grabbing and running. And there's some newspapers say how they ran 2 streets to safety. Once they got into the grounds of the surgeons' hospital, training hospital, they were free then. No one, the people outside couldn't get them. So they're running off with someone's granny, and they can't go into the grounds of this school to retrieve the body. It's mad, like. So that's how they got all the surgeons that went to Waterloo and fight in the wars with Napoleon. So if you look up there at the church, you'll see what looks like a wee round tower built in,
Yeah.
and that's a wee nod to its ecclesiastical past. And there was probably a round tower up there, but that's, of course, if you look at it, it's the same stone and the same way of build than the original the church itself. So I like to think that's a wee nod to its old Christian, old Irish, or
Never
old Catholic
noticed that.
Christian past.
Yeah.
Of Antrim, I went and gathered sources of folklore from all over the place. But I went up the Cross Keenan Road and I interviewed a few policemen. Now, policemen told me about what happened here in 1950. Now these boys are 90-year-old, and I managed to get 5 or 6 eyewitness accounts. This Ellie Mays used to be called Johnny Fox's. Johnny Fox Bar, some of you might remember.
Yeah.
But if you look at its car park, you'll see that there's a steep bank there. When Johnny Fox was digging that out to increase parking space, the cars were going mad that time, you know. So when he started digging it out, came across all these bodies and pikes, and they laid them out in the middle of the road here. And I've eyewitness testimony from the head of the Education Board who was in the queue. There was a queue right down to Belfast. This was in late 1950s, and they were able to come out of their cars and look at all these bodies in the road. One, they say, was about 10 foot tall, and they had pikes, and they had Lochaber axes, and all the equipment that the United Irishmen had. So basically, when about 12 o'clock, the column came this way from Tim O'Patrick, from all people from that direction there. And the column from Donegal Hill started coming down here at 12 o'clock. But McCracken's always, anything you read about it says that he didn't cover his back. You know, reinforcements were always going to come to Antrim, but he did cover his back because we have the evidence now. Out of Johnny Fox's, there was a battle here. There was about a couple hundred United Irishmen here were garrisoned to keep this place here. This was Blow's Mills. Lieutenant Blow was the head of the old volunteers, and this is where the cannons were kept the week before the rising. And in 1950, when a man called Flynn came up here, he bought this whole complex and he started redoing it. Now, there's a wee boy called Bobby Elliott. His father owned the farm over here. You might know the Bobby. He owns a car showroom. He's about 90. He owns a car showroom in the middle of Antrim. He sent me a message, come and see him. So as a wee boy, he came, a wee 10, 11-year-old boy, he came to help Flynn, just as general, a wee bit of interest. So out of Dunadry Mill came all these cannonballs. And you'll not read about this anywhere, about the battle for this place here. So when Colonel Durham came up here about 1 or 2 o'clock to reinforce the garrison, he just bombarded this place and killed all United Irishmen just as fast as they could. And out of here came a number of cannonballs. One of the cannonballs you can go into Castle Gardens and is on display at the wee museum exhibition I have in the castle grounds. So that's it. There's a wee bit of information about the wee bodies that were found here. They're all taken by Queens and never heard of again. But we do have the eyewitness testimonies from the police, from the head of the education service, who's still alive as well in the 90s. And Bobby Elliott's just down the road here, and he'll tell you all about it.
If Queens were contacted, they must have records of what they did from.
Yeah, I've asked a few times, and asked a few professors to meditate for me, and they've come a blank. But that's what happens, and it happens all over the place. And it happened another time in Antrim where we talk about the mass grave, but that's too soon. So we'll go now.